black and white. Now we got Nouveau.
Yeah, exactly.
Which honestly is pretty on par for what we're going to be reading today, which is The Hounds of Baskerville, of the Baskervilles by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, which that's a Sherlock Holmes story, which is set in, I don't know, it's literally in the first paragraph of this thing, 1884-ish. So, they didn't have color back then. Right. So nor do we.
Yeah, exactly.
So, hi, my name is Courtney. I am one of the teen services specialists at the Addison Public Library, and you are?
I'm Samantha. I am the communications and marketing coordinator here at the library.
Yeah, so welcome to the Addison Public Library Twitch stream. This is our very first Twitch stream, so that's why there's no color, because we can't figure out how that works. But hopefully you can hear us well. The little bars on the bottom say that you can. Thank you to our Blue Yeti microphone, which is also something that you can check out at the library and use yourself if you have an Addison library card. That's part of our Library of Things, which is a really great collection that has all sorts of things from like Lego sets to microphones to like streamlights and a whole bunch of other amazing stuff. I know there's like a model of a skeleton in there too, which honestly that's also Sherlock Holmesy. We might want to like grab that and have it in the background one of these days. Just highlight those things. So those are really cool things that you can do if you have your Addison library card. Now, if you don't belong to, as a patron of the Addison Public Library, you're still more than welcome to hang out and join us here. But honestly, the Library of Things is something that's more and more popular in most libraries now. So check out your local library and see if there's, a Library of Things there. They might not have a Blue Yeti microphone, but I know that there's some that have like baking pans.
And like those are really popular.
Really cool stuff. Yeah. So give those a look and you can have a good time. So this is Lunch Bunch. So Lunch Bunch is a program that the Teen Services Department have been doing. We've been going over to the middle school and we'll read books during their lunchtime. Well, we're currently not in the middle school, but to kind of bring that tradition back into here, we're going to be spending the next less than an hour now reading The Hound of the Baskervilles. As I said, this is a Sherlock Holmes short story. The library itself has like 5 copies of this book itself, so a very good like book club book. And if you are local and you want to check this out and read along with us, you can do that. We're going to be doing Lunch Bunch every Tuesday this month, starting at 11 o'clock, going for about the hour. Hopefully we'll figure out how to turn on the color.
Yes, we will. We promise we will.
Honestly, you're not missing out much. I'm wearing gray with black and white, and you're wearing black.
I'm wearing black.
With gray.
With gray.
Yeah. So who cares? Nobody's missing out on anything. This works for everyone.
Exactly.
So if you want to find out about our future streams, there's a couple of ways where you can do that. The first is our handy dandy newsletter, which we're going to ignore who's on there. There I am. But inside here, we have a section that is all about our Twitch streams that are coming up. So for instance, in May, we have Lunch Bunch. That's from 11 to 12. In June, I'm kind of busy at the 11 to 12 mark because we have free lunches at that time. So instead, we're switching our Tuesday streams to 10 a.m., and that's going to be our breakfast and books because we like a theme and alliteration.
Of course.
So that we're also going to like talk a little bit more booky things too. So a little bit of difference, but also it's pretty much the same thing. We're also have a couple of Let's Plays coming up. We're going to highlight some of the Library of Things. We've got board games in our Library of Things. So we're going to be playing some of those. Eventually, if we get the tech to work, and also color, I guess, we're going to try and play some Switch games that you can check out at the library and use here too. We're just highlighting things that we have at the library that are available to you to check out and use, such as the microphone. Pretty much everything we're using, you're able able to utilize at the library. The laptop that we're working with, you can use libraries, or you can use the library's laptops. You can come and check those out, use them inside the building. The Wi-Fi is available at all times. We also have hotspots you can check out too. Like I said, the microphone, you too can be a Twitch streamer, although I'm still not sure we should signify ourselves with that either. Another big stream that's coming up is at the end of the month on May 28th, we're going to have a summer reading announcement stream.
Very exciting.
So it's going to be cool. And I really need to make sure we have color then.
Yes, we do. We'll get it by then.
We'll get it by then. Who knows? It was fine 10 minutes ago, and I'm just not going to try right now. But that is a stream where we're going to go through how our summer reading program works, all the different things that are available to you. We've got a really cool summer reading program. We've been doing it for a few years now, and I think it's top notch.
Yeah.
I personally think all libraries should do it the way that we do it. But I can, you're just going to have to come and see. And then for those of you who are not, local or able to get it yourself, just be jealous is effectively the game. Okay, so let's do this. So I'm going to be reading this book. You're going to be modding the chat.
Yeah, I am.
All millions of you who are watching.
I did put some links in there to Library of Things and to the book that Courtney is reading. You can check it out physically, and we have some digital copies too.
We sure do. We also have copies that are like the whole collections of Sherlock Holmes that honestly have a much cooler cover. This is one of the lamer covers I've ever seen. But it was small and easy to read. So let's jump into it, shall we? Admittedly, I'm a Sherlock Holmes nerd, so I really like Sherlock Holmes a lot. So I'm excited for this. I haven't read these in a while. All right, Chapter 1, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Mr. Sherlock Holmes, who was usually very late in the mornings, save upon those not infrequent occasions when he was up all night, was seated at the breakfast table. I stood upon the hearth rug and picked up the stick which our visitor had left behind him the night before. It was a fine, thick piece of wood, bulbous-headed, of course, of the sort which was known as the Penang, as a Penang lawyer. So that's the name of the stick, which is like a cane, I guess, right? So just under the head was a broad silver band, nearly an inch across, to James Mortimer, M.R.C.S., from his friends of the C.C.H., was engraved upon it, with the date 1884. It was just a stick as the old-fashioned family practitioner used to carry, dignified, solid, and reassuring. Well, Watson, what do you make of it? Holmes was sitting with his back to me, and I had given him no sign of my occupation. How did you know what I was doing? I believe that you have eyes in the back of your head. I have, at least, a well-polished, silver-plated coffee pot in front of me, he said. But tell me, Watson, what do you make of our visitor's stick? Since we have been so unfortunate as to have missed him and have no notion of his errand, this accidental souvenir becomes of importance. Let me hear you reconstruct the man by the examination of it. I think, I said, following as far as I could the methods of my companion, that Dr. Mortimer is a successful elderly medical man, well esteemed, since those who know him give him this mark of their appreciation. Good, said Holmes. Excellent. I think also that the probability is in favor of his being a country practitioner who does a great deal of his visiting on foot. Why so? Well, because this stick, though ordinarily a very handsome one, has been so knocked about that it can hardly imagine a town practitioner carrying it. A thick iron ferrule is worn down. I think that's the bottom of the stick. So it is evident that he has gone through a great amount of walking with it. Perfectly sound, said Holmes. And then again, there is the Friends of the C.C.H. I should guess that is to be something Hunt. the local hunt of whose members he was probably given some surgical assistance, and which he has made such a small presentation in return. Really, Watson, you excel yourself. I can't tell if he's like condescending or like, good job, buddy. Anyway, really, Watson, you excel yourself, said Holmes, pushing back his chair and lighting a cigarette. I am bound to say that in all the accounts which you have been so good as to give my very own small accomplishments, you have habitually underrated your own abilities. It may be that you are not yourself luminous, but you are a conductor of light. He basically said you're not smart, but you at least can put it together. Gotta love it. Some people without possessing genius have a remarkable power of stimulating it. I confess, my dear fellow, that I am very much in your debt. He had never said as much before, and I must admit that his words gave me a keen pleasure, for I had often been piqued by his indifference to my admiration and to the attempts which I had made to give publicly to his methods. I was proud, too, to think that I had so far mastered his system as to apply it in a way that had earned his approval. He now took the stick from my hand and examined it for a few minutes with his naked eyes. Then, with an expression of interest, he laid down his cigarette, and carrying the cane to the window, he looked it over again with convex lenses. So like a magnifying glass? Which is very Sherlock Holmes. Interesting, though elementary, he said, as he returned to his favorite corner in the set. There are certainly one or two indications upon the stick. It gives us the basis of several deductions. Has anything escaped me? I asked with some self-importance. I trust that there is nothing of consequence in which I have overlooked. Oh, I am afraid, my dear Watson, that most of the conclusions were erroneous. Big word there. When I said that you stimulated me, I meant, to be frank, that in noting your fallacies, I was occasionally guided towards the truth. Not that you are entirely wrong in this instance. The man is certainly a country practitioner, and he walks a good deal. Well, then I was right, to that extent. But that was all. No, my dear Watson, not at all, not by no means at all. I would suggest, for example, that a presentation to a doctor is more likely to come from a hospital than from a hunt, and that the initials CC are placed before that hospital. The words Charing Cross very naturally suggest themselves. So that's the Charing Cross Hospital, which is solid. All right. You may be right. The probability lies in the direction. And if we take this as a working hypothesis, we can have a fresh basis from which to start our construction of this unknown visitor. Well then, supposing that CCH does stand for Charing Cross Hospital, what further inferences can we draw? Do none suggest themselves? You know my methods. Apply them. You know, he's totally condescending.
Totally.
Like, totally condescending. But obliviously condescending, I swear. I can only think of the obvious conclusion that the man who practiced in town before going to the country. I think that we might venture a little further than this. Look at it in this light. On what occasion would it be most probable that such a presentation would be made? When would his friends unite to give him a pledge of their goodwill? Obviously, at this moment when Dr. Mortimer withdrew from the service of the hospital in order to start a practice for himself. We know that there has been a presentation, such a gift. We believe that there has been a change from a town hospital to a country practice. It is then stretching our inference too far to say that the presentation was on the occasion of this change. Well, it certainly seems probable. Now, you will observe that he could not have been on the staff of the hospital, since only a man well established in a London practice could hold such a position, and such a one that would not drift into the country. What was he then? If he was in the hospital and yet not on the staff, he could have only been a house surgeon or a house physician, little more than a senior student. And he left 5 years ago, the date on the stick, so to say. So your grave, middle-aged family practitioner vanishes into thin air, my dear Watson, and there emerges a young fellow under 30, amiable, unambitious, absent-minded, and the possessor of a favorite dog, which I should describe roughly as being larger than a terrier and smaller than a mastiff. Where he gets this stuff. Like, I'm sure he'll tell us, but honestly, like, come on. Like, the author, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's kind of, like, notorious for, like, being like, oh, here's the answer. I gave you none of the clues. Like, all right, fine. Let's go for this ride. I laughed incredulously as Sherlock Holmes leaned back on his settee. Settee? How do you even say it?
Settee.
Settee?
Yeah.
Swanky.
Swanky.
All right. Swanky words. Leaned back on his settee and blew little wavering rings of smoke up to the ceiling. Very Gandalf. As to the latter part, I have no means of checking you, I said. But, sorry, it was Watson reading. Wrong person. All right, as to the later part, I have no means of checking you, I said. But at least it is not difficult to find out a few particulars about the man's age and professional career. From my small medical shelf, I took down the medical directory and turned up the name. There were several Mortimers, but only one who could be our visitor, and I read his record aloud. Mortimer James, M.R.C.S., 1882, Gripen, Dartmoor, Devon, house surgeon. From 1882 to 1884 at Charing Cross Hospital. Winner of the Jackson Prize for Comparative Pathology with essay entitled, Is Disease a Reversion? No idea what that means. Corresponding member of the Swedish Pathological Society, author of Some Freaks of Atavism. That's problematic. We're just going to say that. Real truth. Also, Do We Progress? Which was a journal of psychology, and medical officer for the parishes of Gripen, Thorsley, and Highborough, which are, I think, like towns and regions in the England area. No mention of the local hunt, Watson. Yeah, rub it in, dude. Said Holmes with a mischievous smile. Either one, it works. But a country doctor, as you very astutely observed. I think that I am fairly justified in my inferences. As to the adjectives, I said, if I remember right, amiable, unambitious, and absent-minded. It is my experience that it is only an amiable man of this world who receives testimonials. Only an unambitious one who abandons a London career for the country, and only an absent-minded one who leaves his stick and not his visiting card after waiting an hour in your room. And the dog? He has been in the habit of carrying this stick behind his master, being a heavy stick that the dog has held tightly in the middle, with the marks of his teeth very plainly visible. That's actually an adorable image. Like this guy just trolling through the countryside with his dog behind him, like carrying his like walking stick, just like a giant. That's cute. That's really cute. Anyway, the dog's jaw, as shown in the space between these marks, is too broad, in my opinion, for a terrier, and not broad enough for a mastiff. It may have been. Yes, by Jove, it may have been a curly-haired spaniel. Dude, how? I mean, it makes the picture far more adorable, but like, how? All right. He had risen and paced the room as he spoke, and now he halted in the recess of the window. There was such a ring of conviction in his voice that I glanced up at surprise. My dear fellow, how could you possibly be so sure of that? That dog is outside, isn't he? Like, it has to be. For the very simple reason that I see the dog himself on our very doorstep, and there is the ring of its owner. Don't move, I beg you, Watson. He is a professional brother of yours, and your presence may be of assistance to me. Now is the dramatic moment of fate, Watson, when you hear a step upon the stair which is walking into your life, and you know not whether for good or ill. What does Dr. James Mortimer, the man of science, ask of Sherlock Holmes, the specialist in crime? Come in! The appearance of our visitor was a surprise to me, since I had expected a typical country practitioner. He was a very tall, thin man, with a long nose, like a beak, which jutted out between two keen gray eyes, set closely together and sparkling brightly from behind a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. He was clad in a professional but rather slovenly fashion, for his frock coat was dingy and his trousers were frayed. Though young, his long back was already bowed, and he walked with a forward thrust of his head and a general air of peering benevolence. As he entered, his eyes fell upon the stick in Holmes's hand, and he ran towards it with an exclamation of joy. "I am so very glad," he said. "I was not sure whether I had left it here or in the shipping office. I would not lose this stick for the world." I relate to this man so hard. I've lost literally anything. That was so important to me. "A presentation, I see," said Holmes. "Yes, sir. From Charing Cross Hospital. From one or two of my friends there on the occasion of my marriage." "Oh, dear, dear, that's bad." And Holmes shaking his head. Dr. Mortimer blinked through his glasses in mild astonishment. "Why is that bad?" "Only that you have disarranged all our little deductions. Your marriage, you say." "Yes, sir, I'm married, and so I left the hospital, and with all hopes of a consulting practice. It was necessary to make a home of my own." Come, we are not so far wrong after all," said Holmes. "And now, Dr. James Mortimer, Mr. A humble MRCS. I don't know what those are acronyms. I'm horrible with acronyms, but I have no idea what those mean. All right, and a man of precise mind, evidently. A dabbler in science, Mr. Holmes. A picker of shells on the shores of the great unknown ocean. I presume that it is Mr. Sherlock Holmes who I am addressing, and not... No, this is my friend, Dr. Watson." "Glad to meet you, sir. I have heard your name mentioned in connection with that of your friend. You interest me very much, Mr. Holmes. I had expected so... Oh, wow, that's a word. Look at that monstrosity.
Oh, my goodness. I'm going to have to type that one out for everybody.
Yeah. All right.
I also found MRCS.
Did you?
Yes, it's member of the Royal College of Surgeons.
Beautiful. Mm-hmm. All right, cool. We're even going to have to look up this word. That's... Okay. Dolichocephalic. So DOLICHOCEPHALIC. Okay, so he's looking at the rest of this sentence. He's just blathering out like medical jargon. So he says, "I had hardly expected so dolichocephalic, no idea, a skull or such well-marked supraorbital development."
Having a relatively long skull.
Okay, so he's got a big head. Mm-hmm. Awesome. So basically he's like, you, Holmes, are interesting. You've got a big head and a big brain, I think is effectively what he's saying. "Would you have any objection to my running my finger along your parietal fissure?" So basically a part of his head. "A cast of your skull, sir, until the original is available." Oh, he's like, can I have a cast of your skull until you die, and then can I have your skull? All right, so a cast of your skull, sir, until the original is available, would be an ornament to any anthropological museum. It is not my intention to be fulsome, but I confess that I covet your skull. That's amazing. Like, you have a weird skull. Your brain is weird. Like, can I have it when you die?
We learned so much.
We learned so much. True. That word is going to haunt me.
Yeah.
Days. All right, fantastic. And this is the welcome to library, folks. All right. Sherlock Holmes waved our strange visitor into a chair. "You are an enthusiast in your line of thought, I perceive, sir, as I am in mine," he said. "I observe from your forefinger that you make your own cigarettes. Have no hesitation in lighting one." The man drew out paper and tobacco and twirled the one in the other with surprising dexterity. He had long, quivering fingers as agile and restless as the antenna of an insect. Holmes was silent, but his little darting glances showed me the interest which he took in our curious companion. "I presume, sir," he said at last, "that it was not merely for the purpose of examining my skull that you have done me the honor to call here last night and again today." "No, sir, no, though I am happy to have had the opportunity of doing that as well. I came to you, Mr. Holmes, because I recognize that I am myself an unpractical man, and because I am suddenly confronted with the most serious and extraordinary problem. Recognizing as I do that you are the second highest expert in Europe." "Indeed, sir, may I inquire who has the honor of being the first?" said Holmes with some asperity. "To the man of the precisely scientific mind of the work of Monsieur Bertillon," it's French, must always appeal strongly. "Then had you better not consult him?" "I said, sir, to the precisely scientific mind, but as a practical man of affairs, it is acknowledged that you stand alone. I trust, sir, that I am not inadvertently—" "Just a little," said Holmes. "I think, Dr. Mortimer, that would be wisely, if, without more ado, that you would kindly tell me plainly what the exact nature of the problem it is that you demand my assistance." Chapter 2. We've managed it. Making sure I didn't skip a page.
Yeah.
That's a weird end of a chapter. I forgot, how much, his writing is just conversation.
Exactly.
Which, woof. Okay. Chapter 2, The Curse of the Baskervilles. This is when the thunderstorm that was earlier today needs to kick in and go
Oh, that'd be, perfect.
When I woke up this morning, there were thunderstorms. I was like, it's time. All right. "I have in my pocket a manuscript," said Dr. James Mortimer. "I observed it as you entered the room," said Holmes. "It is an old manuscript. Yes, early 18th century, unless it's a forgery." "How can you say that, sir?" You have presented an inch or two of it to my examination all the time that you have been talking. It would be a poor expert who could not give the date of the document within a decade or so. You may possibly have read my little monograph upon the subject. I put that at 1730. Well, the exact date is 1742. Ooh, tit for tat. Dr. Mortimer drew it from his breast pocket. "This family paper was committed to my care by Sir Charles Baskerville, whose sudden and tragic death some 3 months ago created such an excitement in Devonshire. I may say that I was his personal friend, as well as his medical attendant. He was a strong-minded man, sir, shrewd, practical, and as unimaginative as I am myself. Yet he took this document very seriously, and his mind was prepared for such an end as did eventually overtake him." Holmes stretched out his hand for the manuscript and flattened it upon his knee. "You will observe, Watson, the alternative use of the long S and the short. It is one of several indicators which enabled me to fix the date." So because of the writing. Anyway, he's so presumptuous. I love him. "I looked over his shoulder at the yellow paper and the faded script. As the head was written, Baskerville Hall, and below, in large scrawling figures, 1742. It appears to be a statement of sort. Yes, it is a statement of a certain legend which runs in the Baskerville family. But I understand that it is something more modern and practical upon which you wish to consult me." "Most modern, a most practical pressing matter, which must be decided within 24 hours. But the manuscript is short, and it is intimately connected with the affair. With your permission, I will read it to you." Holmes leaned back in his chair, placed his fingertips together, and closed his eyes with an air of resignation. Dr. Mortimer turned the manuscript to the light and read in a high, cracking voice with the following curious old-world narrative. It's like it's short, and it's like a full like 3 pages.
Oh, yeah.
Oh no, it
my
keeps
gosh.
going. It keeps. Oh. All right.
Here we go.
This-
Here we go.
This might be the end of our stream. Oh boy. Oh. All right. I'm gonna attempt to not be in a cracking voice. Of the origin of the Hound of Baskervilles, there has been many statements. Yet, as I come in a direct line from Hugo Baskerville, there we go, and as I had the story from my father, who has had it from his, I have set it down with all the belief that it is occurred even as it is set forth. And I would have you believe, my sons, that the same justice which punishes sin may also most graciously forgive it, and that no ban is so heavy that by prayer and repentance it may be resolved. Learn then from this story not to fear the fruits of the past, but rather be circumspect of the future, that those foul passions whereby our family has suffered so grievously may not be loosed to our undoing. Doom, doom, doom. Know then that in the time of the Great Rebellion, the history of which was learned by the Lord Clarendon, I most earnestly commend to your attention. I don't know which rebellion it's talking about. I doubt it's ours. I don't think it's our rebellion. Probably closer to like the War of the Roses or something, because that's like their civil war, but whatever. So long time ago, this manor of Baskervilles was held by Hugo of that name, nor can it be gainsaid that he was a most wild, profane, and godless man. This, in truth, his neighbors might have pardoned, seeing that saints have never flourished in those parts. But there was in him a certain wanton and cruel humor which made his name a byword through the West. It chanced that this Hugo came to love, if indeed so dark a passion may be known under so bright a name, the daughter of a yeoman who held lands near the Baskerville estate. Scandal. Woo. But the young woman, being discreet and of good repute, would ever avoid him, for she feared his evil name. So it came to pass that one Michaelmas, this Hugo, which is Michaelmas is sort of like Christmas-ish, right?
I actually don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I can look it up.
Yeah, let's find out. So it's a holiday or time frame. Okay, whatever. It came to pass that one Michaelmas, this Hugo, with 5 or 6 of his idle and wicked companions, stole down upon the farm and carried off the maiden. They kidnapped her. Her father and her brothers being from home, as he well knew. So he stalked her and then he kidnapped her. This guy sounds great. When they had brought her to the hall, the maiden was placed in an upper chamber, while Hugo and his friends sat down to a long carouse party, as was their nightly custom. Now the poor lass upstairs was like to have her wits turned at the singing and shouting and terrible oaths which came up to her from below. For they say that the words used by Hugo Baskerville when he was in wine were such a might blast that the man who said them. At last, in the stress of her fear, she did that which might have daunted the bravest and most active man. For by the aid of the growth of the ivy which covered, and still covers, the south wall, she came down from under the eaves and so homeward across the moor, there being 3 leagues betwixt the hill and her father's farm. So she climbed down the ivy, out the window, down the ivy, down the wall, and ran away. What an awesome girl. Let's go. It chanced that some time later, Hugo left his guests to carry food and drink, and with other worse things, perchance, to his captive, and so found that the cage was empty and the bird escaped. Then it would seem he became as one hath a devil, for rushing down the stairs into the dining hall, he sprang upon the great table, flagons and trenchers flying before him, and he cried aloud before all of the company that he would that very night render his body and soul to the powers of evil if he might but overtake the wench. So he's like, I'm going to sell myself to the devil if I can catch her. And while the revelers stood aghast in the fury of the man, one more wicked or it may be, more drunk than the rest, cried out that they should put the hounds upon her. Whereat Hugo ran from the house, crying to his grooms that they should saddle his mare and unkennel the pack, and giving the hounds a kerchief of the maids, he swung them to the line and so off in full cry in the moonlight over the moor. So now he's chasing her with dogs. This guy's awful. Now, for some space, the revelers stood agape, unable to understand all that had been done in such haste. But anon their bemused wits awoke to the nature of the deed which was like to be done upon the moorlands. They're like, wait, they're gonna kill her. They're just like, what did we do? Everything was now in an uproar, some calling for their pistols, some for their horses, and some for another flask of wine. That guy's... great people. All right, but at length some sense came back to their crazed minds, and the whole of them, 13 in number, took horse and started in pursuit. The moon shone clear above them, and they rode swiftly abreast, taking that course which the maid must needs have taken her if she was to reach her own home. They had gone a mile or two when they passed one of the night shepherds upon the moorland, and they cried to him to know if he had seen the hunt. The man, as the story goes, was so crazed with fear that he could scarce speak. But at last he said that he had indeed seen the unhappy maiden, with the hounds upon her track. But I have seen more than that, he said, for Hugo Baskerville passed me upon his black mare, and there ran mute behind him such a hound of hell as God forbid should ever be at my heels. So the drunken squires cursed the shepherd and rode onward. They're like, screw you, guy. But it's like, he told you what happened. Like, he saw the lady getting chased by dogs, which is horrible, and then the Lord getting chased by a bigger dog, which he deserves. And they're like, you're a jerk. And that's rude. Anyway, but soon their skins turned cold, for there came a galloping across the moor, and the black mare, dabbled with white froth, went past with trailing bridle and empty saddle. Then the revelers rode close together, for great fear was on them. But they still followed over the moor, though each, as they had been alone, would have been right glad to have turned his horse all around. They're like, we don't want to be here. Riding slowly in this fashion, they came at last upon the hounds. These, though known for their valor and their breed, were whimpering in a cluster at the head of the deep dip or goyle, as we call it, upon the moor, some slinking away and some with startling hackles and staring eyes, gazing down the narrow valley behind them, or before them. So they caught up with the dogs, and the dogs are terrified. Good. The company had come to a halt, more sober men, as you may guess, than they had started, and most of them would by no means advance, but 3 of them, the boldest, or maybe the most drunken, rode forward down the goyle. So it's like sort of like a dip in the hill. Now it opened up into a broad space in which stood 2 of those great stones, still to be seen there, which were set by certain forgotten people in the days of old. The moon was shining bright upon the clearing, and there in the center lay the unhappy maid where she had fallen, dead of fear and of fatigue. Poor girl. And it was not the sight of her body, nor yet was it that of the body of Hugo Baskerville lying near her, which raised upon the hairs of their head, of that of 3 daredevil roysters. But it was that, standing over Hugo and plucking at his throat, there stood a foul thing, a great black beast shaped like a hound, and yet larger than any hound that had ever mortal eyes had rested upon. And even as they looked at the thing, tore the throat out of Hugo Baskerville, on which as it turned its blazing eyes and dripping jaws upon them, the 3 shrieked with fear and rode for dear life, still screaming, across the moor. One, it is said, died that very night of what he had seen, and the other twain were but broken men for the rest of their days. I feel a little bit of a good, like ugh, but also vicious. All right, such is the tale, my sons, of the coming of the Hound, which it is said to have plagued the family so sorely ever since. But I have set it down, it is because that which is clearly known hath less terror than that which is to be but hinted and guessed at. So basically, if you know what's coming, you're going to be less scared of what if you just are trying to figure it out. Nor can it be denied that many of the family have been unhappy in their deaths, which have been sudden and bloody and mysterious. Yet may we shelter ourselves in the infinite goodness of Providence, which would not forever punish the innocent beyond and that third or fourth generation which is threatened in Holy Writ. To that Providence, my son, I hereby commend you, and I counsel you by the way of caution to forbear from crossing the moor in those dark hours when the powers of evil are exalted. So basically, don't go walking in the dark across the moors are actually pretty dangerous if you're walking in the dark. You can people go missing in those suckers. So this is written from Hugo Baskerville to the sons Rodger and John, with instructions that they say nothing hereafter to their sister Elizabeth. Why? Because the curse doesn't follow girls? Whatever. Oh my, why is there more? Anyway.
You come out for a minute and you go right back in. You're going right back.
I did. I was like, cool, we finished that. There's more. There's more manuscripts. Right on. Okay, it's a shorter one this time.
Yeah, it is.
All right. So when Dr. Mortimer had finished reading this singular narrative, he pushed his spectacles up on his forehead and stared across at Mr. Sherlock Holmes. The latter yawned and tossed the end of his cigarette into the fire. Well, he said, do you not find it interesting? To a collector of fairy tales. Dr. Mortimer drew a folded newspaper out of his pocket. Now, Mr. Holmes, we will give you something a little more recent. This is the Devon County Chronicle on May 14th of this year. What day is it? All right, so in 7 days.
Close.
Ooh, we're so close. What a timely book. It is a short account of the facts elicited at the death of Sir Charles Baskerville, which occurred a few days before that date. Maybe on the 7th. Anyway. All right. My friend adjusted a little forward, and his expression became intent. Our visitor readjusted his glasses and began. Here's the newspaper. The recent death of Sir Charles Baskerville, whose name has been mentioned as the probable Liberal candidate for the Mid-Devon at the next election, has cast a gloom over the country. Ooh, he was up for election. Motive? Who knows? Though Sir Charles has resided at Baskerville Hall for a comparatively short period, his amiability of character and extreme generosity has won the affection and respect of all who have been brought into contact with him. In these days of nouveau riches, it is refreshing to find a case where the scion of an old country family, which has fallen upon evil days, is able to make his own fortune and to bring it back with him to restore the fallen grandeur of his line. Sir Charles, it is well known, made large sums of money in South African speculation. More wise than those who go on until the wheel turns against them, he realized his gains and returned to England with them. It is only 2 years since that he took up his residence at Baskerville Hall, and it is common talk how large those schemes of reconstruction and improvement which had been interrupted by his death. Being himself childless, it was his openly expressed desire that the whole countryside should, within his own lifetime, profit by his good fortune, and many will have personal reasons for bewailing his untimely end. His generous donations to local and country charities have been frequently chronicled in these columns. The circumstances connecting with the death of Sir Charles cannot be said to have been entirely cleared up by the inquest, but at least enough has been done to dispose of those rumors to which local superstition has given rise. There is no reason whatsoever to suspect foul play, or to imagine that death could be but from anything other than natural causes. Sir Charles was a widower, and a man who may be said to have been in some ways an eccentric habit of mind. In spite of his considerable wealth, he was simple in his personal tastes, and his indoor servants at Baskerville Hall consisted of a married couple named Barrymore, the husband acting as a butler and the wife as a housekeeper. Their evidence, corroborated by those of several friends, tends to show that Sir Charles's health has, for some time, been impaired. This and points specifically to some affection of the heart, manifesting itself in changes of color, breathlessness, and acute attacks of nervous depression. Dr. James Mortimer, the friend and medical attendant of the deceased, has given advice to the same effect. So it's like his heart could be failing, or also anxiety. Like if there's a dog chasing you that's cursed your whole family, I think you'd be prone to like some repercussions on that effect, Like, I wouldn't be okay. The facts of the case are simple. Sir Charles Baskerville was in the habit every night before going to bed of walking down the famous yew alley of Baskerville Hall. The evidence of the Barrymore shows that this has been his custom. On the 4th of May, Sir Charles had declared his intention of starting the next day for London. Ooh, May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. Or apparently, perhaps not with Sir Charles. So he declared that his intention of starting the next day for London. So he was going to go to London the next day. And had ordered Barrymore to prepare his luggage. That night, he went out as usual for his nocturnal walk, and in the course of which he was in the habit of smoking a cigar. He never returned. At 12 o'clock, Barrymore, finding the hall door still open, became alarmed and, lighting a lantern, went in search of his master. The day had been wet, and Sir Charles's footprints were easily traced down the alley. Halfway down this walk there is a gate which leads out onto the moor. There were indications that Sir Charles had stood for some little time there. He had proceeded down the alley, and it was at the far end of it that his body was discovered. One fact which has not been explained is the statement of Barrymore that his master's footprints altered their character from the time that he passed from the moor gate, and then he had appeared from thence onward to have been walking upon his toes. Running, honestly, he's been running. One Murphy, a gypsy horse dealer, also not a great name anymore. We don't use that word anymore. So a horse dealer was on the moor at no great distance at the time. He appears by his own confession to have been the worse for drink. He declares that he heard cries, but was unable to state from what direction they came from. No signs of violence were to be discovered upon Sir Charles's person, though the doctor's evidence pointed to an almost incredible facial distortion, so great that Dr. Mortimer refused at first to believe that it was indeed his friend and patient who lay before him. It was explained that is a symptom which is not unusual in cases of dysnopia. That's another word. That's another tricky one. And death by cardiac exhaustion. So his heart gave out. This explanation was borne out by a post-mortem examination, which showed long-standing organic disease, and the coroner's jury returned in a verdict in accordance with the medical evidence. It is well that this is so, for it is obviously of the utmost importance that Sir Charles's heir should settle at the Hall and continue the good work which has been so sadly interrupted. Had the prosaic finding of the coroner not finally put an end to the romantic stories which had been whispered in connection with the affair, it might have been difficult to find a tenant for the Baskerville Hall. It is understood that the next of kin of Mr. Henry Baskerville, if he was still be alive, the son of Sir Charles Baskerville's younger brother. The young man, when last heard of, was in America, and inquiries are being instituted with a view to informing him of his good fortune. Congratulations, your uncle's dead, and now you have a curse. Hooray. What was dysnopia or whatever?
Shortness of breath.
Oh, yeah, that sounds about right. That scans. Methinks he was running. And when
Right.
thou runs,
That happens.
Yeah, that happens, yeah. It
Yeah.
definitely happens to me. Like within seconds.
That happens.
All right, that's the end of that article. Whew. Okay. I think we'll stop there because we've got like just 5 minutes
Oh,
left.
yeah, good stuff. Good place to
So,
stop.
yeah, good place to stop. We're 12 pages in. Good golly, Miss Molly. Although, yeah, no, that's going to take longer than 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So we'll stop there and we'll pick up again next time and find out what Sherlock Holmes thinks about that little piece of information. I'm sure that he has many, many thoughts about things that weren't even told to us. So yeah, come on back next week or whenever you're watching this. I think this will be on our Twitch for like about a week is when it usually goes, and I think we'll have it downloaded and uploaded to our YouTube channel. So if you're watching us in the future on YouTube, you can probably binge this, which weird. Okay, but hey, enjoy. I hope you're enjoying this. I'm having a good time.
It was great.
So hooray. Once again, remember to try and follow us. We also have our YouTube. You can find our information there too. We will be doing this again next week on Tuesday at 11 o'clock. And join us with your lunchtimes. So hooray. All right.
Thanks for
Have a
coming.
great one. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, of course.
And see you next week. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye. We did it. This will end your stream. We're doing so well with this part. Bye.